There's a shadow that dwells in the darkest corners of your mind, a persistent whisper that emerged when you were still too young to understand its devastating potential. This shadow has no physical form, leaves no visible scars on the surface, but shapes with surgical precision every choice you make about money, about worth, about how much you allow yourself to receive from the unlimited abundance of this existence. Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher who dared to contemplate the darkest valleys of human experience, warned us about something few can truly grasp. We are not who we imagine ourselves to be. We are a collection of voices, evaluations, beliefs that were implanted in us long before we possessed adequate consciousness to challenge them. And it's precisely here, in this invisible domain of early childhood, that the deepest origins of your relationship with prosperity are located. When you were small, your mind functioned like prepared soil, open to every expression, every gesture, every pause filled with meaning. You didn't yet understand that you were being conditioned, that each reprimand, each comparison, each moment when your parents, teachers, or caregivers expressed disappointment was forging mental pathways that would define years later your ability to accept, to grow, to flourish. Perhaps you remember that time when you asked for something and heard, "Money doesn't grow on trees," or when you expressed a grand aspiration and received in return, "You need to be more realistic," or even worse, when nothing even needed to be said. But you sensed that thick atmosphere of scarcity, of permanent anxiety, of parents who whispered about bills and debts when they thought you weren't listening. But you were listening. Your unconscious was absorbing every tone, every fluctuation of insufficiency, every indication that the world was a dangerous place where resources were limited and only a privileged few could exist in abundance. And so, without anyone noticing, a personality founded on scarcity was being built within you, a silent programming that today sabotages every effort you make to expand financially. The most devastating part is that this programming didn't happen through obvious traumatic events, but through thousands of daily micro-wounds that went unnoticed. Every time you witnessed your parents stress about money, your nervous system registered that money was a source of tension. Every time you heard comments about rich people being greedy, your unconscious mind absorbed that prosperity was morally questionable. Every time you witnessed arguments about not having enough money, you internalized that inadequacy was the normal state of affairs. Nietzsche spoke about eternal recurrence, this concept that we're destined to repeat the same patterns infinitely until we have the courage to confront them consciously. And isn't this exactly what happens with your relationship to money? Don't you see how you repeat endlessly the same cycles of self-destruction? How whenever you're about to take a financial step forward, something inside you whispers that you don't deserve it, that it's too risky, that it's better to settle for less. This pattern of eternal recurrence expresses itself in subtle and devastating ways. You might possess the technical knowledge needed to prosper. You might have real opportunities in front of you. You might even have moments of genuine abundance. But invariably something happens that leads you back to square one. An investment that fails, an impulsive choice that destroys months of progress, an inexplicable self-sabotage that seems to emerge from nowhere, but actually rises from the depths of your conditioned subconscious. This whisper isn't your voice. It's the voice of those who cared for you when you were too fragile to protect yourself. It's the voice of the anxious mother who transferred her worries about security onto you. It's the voice of the father who, in trying to protect you from life's disappointments, ended up limiting your capacity to dream big. It's the voice of an entire society that confuses modesty with smallness, that glorifies struggle and suspects prosperity. But there are even deeper layers to this programming. There's the trauma of denied recognition. of the child who had their achievements diminished or dismissed. There's the trauma of constant comparison, of the child who grew up being measured against others and always found lacking. There's the trauma of premature responsibility, of the child who learned that expressing needs was a burden to the adults around them. Childhood trauma related to wealth doesn't need to be something dramatic or obvious. In fact, the most devastating traumas are the most subtle ones, those we don't even recognize as traumas. It's the trauma of the child who never felt truly seen in their greatness. It's the trauma of having dreams ridiculed or ignored. It's the trauma of growing up in an environment where money was always a source of tension, never celebration. Every time you heard you were too idealistic, that you needed to be more realistic, that you should be grateful for what you had, a part of your abundant essence was being cut away, reduced, taught to hide. And the cruelest part is that this was done by people who loved you, who believed they were protecting you, preparing you for a world they themselves feared. This conditioning process creates what we can call a scarcity personality, a deep psychological structure that becomes the lens through which you perceive all financial opportunities. This personality functions as an unconscious filter that distorts your perception of reality, making you see limitation where there's abundance, danger where there's opportunity, impossibility where there's infinite potential. The scarcity personality has its own sophisticated defenses. It makes you rationalize mediocrity as prudence. It makes you interpret healthy ambition as dangerous greed. It makes you confuse humility with self-deprecation. It creates an unconscious resistance to any information or opportunity that contradicts your basic programming of limitation. Nietzsche told us that God was dead, but he didn't speak about the false gods we continue worshipping without realizing it. And one of the most powerful false gods in our society is the belief that virtue lies in deprivation, that there's something morally superior about having less, struggling more, sacrificing more. This is a collective programming that was internalized by you through the voices of your childhood, and that today functions as an invisible magnetic field repelling abundance from your life. This collective programming manifests through deeply rooted beliefs that good people shouldn't worry about money, that spirituality and material abundance are incompatible, that there's nobility in financial suffering, that struggle is proof of character. All of these are mental constructs that serve to keep people trapped in cycles of limitation, but are presented as unquestionable moral truths. Have you ever wondered why some individuals seem to naturally magnetize opportunities and resources, while others, equally talented and hardworking, remain trapped in cycles of limitation? The difference isn't in the skills, it's not in technical knowledge or willpower. The difference lies in the subconscious programming about self-worth, about deservingness, about the fundamental belief that the universe is abundant or scarce. The child who grew up hearing, "We don't have money for that," learned that they don't have. The child who grew up seeing parents fight about money learned that money brings conflict. The child who grew up being compared to other children who had more learned that they were insufficient. And all these learnings crystallized into subconscious identities that today operate as automatic programs, determining not just how much you earn, but primarily how much you allow yourself to receive. There's also the phenomenon of what we can call unconscious family loyalty, a deep psychological dynamic where, without realizing it, you remain financially limited as a way of maintaining connection with your family of origin. If your parents lived in scarcity, part of you might feel that prospering would be a betrayal, a way of abandoning them, or considering yourself superior to them. This unconscious loyalty can manifest as a feeling of guilt every time you have financial success, or as an inexplicable impulse to give money to others even when you yourself are struggling. It's as if there's a subterranean belief that you don't have the right to have more than those who raised you, that your prosperity would be an implicit criticism of their limitations. Nietzsche's concept of the superhuman isn't about superiority over others, but about superiority over the limited versions of ourselves that were built by external conditioning. The superhuman is one who had the courage to question all the beliefs that were imposed on them, to identify which voices in their head are truly theirs and which are echoes of foreign programming. When it comes to wealth, becoming the superhuman means recognizing that the voice whispering you don't deserve it isn't yours. The voice saying it's selfish to want more isn't yours. The voice warning don't be greedy isn't yours. These are borrowed voices, inherited ones, that you carry as if they were absolute truths, but in reality are just dysfunctional fears transmitted through generations. The process of identifying these voices requires brutal honesty with yourself. You need to be willing to recognize that much of what you consider your personality might actually be just external programming. You need to question every automatic reaction you have toward money, every judgment that arises when you see prosperous people, every resistance you feel when facing expansion opportunities. This investigation can be uncomfortable because it reveals that you've been, largely, an emotional robot, repeating patterns that were installed decades ago. But it's also liberating, because it shows that you have the power to consciously choose which programs you want to keep running in your mind and which you want to uninstall permanently. The healing process isn't simple, because first you need to recognize the existence of what was never named. How do you heal trauma that no one ever identified as trauma? How do you reprogram beliefs that were installed when you didn't even know you had a mind to be programmed? How do you free yourself from voices that became so intimate that you confuse them with your own consciousness? The answer lies in developing what Nietzsche called the free spirit, the ability to observe your own mental processes without being automatically dominated by them. You need to create an observing distance between you and your thoughts, between you and your emotional reactions, between you and your behavioral patterns. The answer lies in silence, not the passive silence of resignation, but the active silence of deep observation. You need to learn to create spaces of quietude where you can truly hear what's happening inside you. You need to develop the courage to question every thought about money, every emotional reaction to opportunities, every impulse towards self-sabotage. In these moments of deep silence, you begin to perceive that there's a fundamental difference between thoughts that arise spontaneously from your inner wisdom and those that are merely mechanical repetitions of old programming. Wisdom thoughts have an expansive, liberating quality that opens possibilities. Programming thoughts have a contractive, limiting quality that closes possibilities. When you can position yourself as an observer of your own mental patterns, something extraordinary happens. You realize there's a distance between you and your thoughts. You realize that you are not your beliefs about money, you just carry them. And if you carry them, you can also choose to set them aside. This process of disidentification is revolutionary because it reveals that you have much more power over your internal reality than you ever imagined. You're not a victim of your thoughts. You're the conscious observer who can choose which thoughts to nurture and which to let pass like clouds in the sky of consciousness. Nietzsche spoke about the importance of becoming who we truly are, but for that, we first need to discover who we are not. You are not the frightened child who learned the world was dangerous. You are not the voice of your parents, repeating their own limitations. You are not the result of the fears of a society that confuse scarcity with virtue. You are a unique expression of infinite consciousness, endowed with unlimited capacities for creation and manifestation. You are a being who came to this world not to repeat the limitation patterns of previous generations, but to transcend them, to demonstrate new possibilities of conscious abundance and prosperity. But recognizing this intellectually isn't enough. You need to embody this truth at all levels of your being: mental, emotional, energetic, and physical. You need every cell in your body to remember your abundant nature, every heartbeat to pulse with the frequency of prosperity, every breath to be an affirmation of your infinite capacity to receive. The universe doesn't know scarcity. Scarcity is a human invention, a mental construct based on fear. The universe is constantly expanding, creating, multiplying. Every cell in your body is a universe in miniature, operating with an abundance that defies any logic of limitation. Your heart beats millions of times without you having to pay for each beat. Your lungs process air for free. Your mind processes thousands of pieces of information per second without charging processing fees. This natural abundance manifests at all levels of existence. Stars radiate light for billions of years without worrying if there's enough energy. Oceans don't fear running out of water. Trees don't question whether they deserve to grow. Only human beings, through dysfunctional mental programming, have created the illusion of limitation amid infinite abundance. Abundance is your original nature. Scarcity is acquired programming. And all programming can be deprogrammed. Every belief can be questioned, every pattern can be transformed, but this requires something Nietzsche considered fundamental: the courage to look into the abyss of your own conditioning without looking away. This courageous gaze reveals successive layers of programming. First, you recognize the most obvious beliefs about money. Then, you identify the emotional patterns that sustain these beliefs. Next, you discover the family dynamics that created these patterns. Finally, you reach the deepest programming about your intrinsic worth as a human being. There's a moment in the journey back to your abundant nature when you need to forgive. Not just forgive those who programmed you for scarcity, but forgive yourself for having believed for so long that you were limited. Forgiveness isn't an act of weakness, it's an act of supreme power. It's you taking total responsibility for your life and consciously choosing the beliefs you want to carry from now on. Forgiveness has deep layers when it comes to financial programming. You need to forgive your parents for having transmitted their own fears about money, but also recognize that they did the best they could with the level of consciousness they had at the time. You need to forgive society for having created systems that perpetuate scarcity, but also take responsibility for transcending these systems through your own transformation. When you forgive your parents' fears, you free yourself from the obligation to repeat them. When you forgive society for having taught you that abundance was sin, you free yourself to create a new relationship with prosperity. When you forgive yourself for having sabotaged yourself so many times, you free yourself to start over, this time aligned with your true nature. The deepest forgiveness is the one you grant to the inner child who internalized all these limiting programs. This child didn't know they were being programmed, had no psychological defenses to question what they were absorbing, simply tried to survive and be accepted in the environment where they found themselves. Forgiving this child releases the energy that was trapped in resistance and self-judgment. Money is energy, and like all energy, it flows naturally when it encounters no resistance. The resistances that prevent the abundant flow of resources in your life aren't external, they're internal. They're the childhood voices whispering distrust. They're the inherited fears creating contraction where there should be expansion. They're the limiting beliefs functioning like dams in a river that naturally wants to flow. These internal resistances manifest in very concrete ways in the material world. They can appear as procrastination when faced with business opportunities, as unconscious sabotage of important professional relationships, as impulsive financial decisions that destroy months of progress. as an inexplicable inability to charge what your work is really worth. Reprogramming your relationship with wealth is an act of personal revolution. It's you declaring independence from the limitations that were imposed on you. It's you consciously choosing to believe in your infinite capacity to create, to receive, to prosper. It's you taking your rightful place as co-creator of an abundant universe. This personal revolution doesn't happen just at the level of ideas, but requires a complete transformation of your identity. You need to see yourself no longer as someone who doesn't have a knack for money or who wasn't born to be rich, but as a naturally abundant being who temporarily forgot their true nature. But attention, this transformation doesn't happen just at the mental level. It's not enough to repeat positive affirmations about money if your emotions continue loaded with fear and contraction. You also need to work with the emotional body, allowing the repressed emotions from childhood to be felt, honored, and released. The body holds the memory of all the financial traumas you lived. Every time you heard, "We don't have money," your body contracted. Every time you witnessed arguments about money, your nervous system went on alert. Every time your dreams were ridiculed, your vital energy diminished. All these memories are stored in your body and continue influencing your financial decisions to this day. Maybe you need to cry for the child who learned their dreams were too big. Maybe you need to feel anger at the programming that was imposed on you without your consent. Maybe you need to feel sadness for the years you lost sabotaging yourself in the name of foreign beliefs. All these emotions are sacred. They're part of the liberation process. The emotional release process isn't just cathartic, it's also creative. Every repressed emotion that's released creates space for new possibilities. Every contraction that's dissolved allows greater expansion. Every fear that's faced reveals a power that was hidden behind it. What Nietzsche called amor fati, love of fate, also includes love for the tortuous paths that brought you here. Your traumas aren't just obstacles to be overcome. They're also teachers who taught you about the nature of limitation so you could consciously choose expansion. Every moment you were financially rejected taught you about the value of self-acceptance. Every time you sabotaged yourself showed you the importance of consciously choosing your thoughts. Every limiting pattern you identified in yourself gave you an opportunity to exercise your power of transformation. This perspective completely transforms your relationship with your past difficulties. Instead of seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances, you recognize yourself as a spiritual warrior who chose to experience limitation in order to teach about abundance. Instead of lamenting lost time, you celebrate the wisdom gained through each experience. The journey back to your abundant nature isn't a straight line. It's a spiral that sometimes seems to take you backward, but is actually taking you to ever deeper levels of understanding and integration. Each turn of the spiral offers you an opportunity to heal more subtle layers of programming, to release more refined resistances, to expand your capacity to receive. This spiral nature of growth is important to understand because it prevents discouragement when you realize you're dealing again with patterns you thought you'd overcome. It's not regression, it's deepening. You're working with more subtle layers of the same programming, developing more refined levels of consciousness and freedom. And here we arrive at the most beautiful paradox of this journey. The more you heal from the compulsive need to have money, the more magnetically money flows to you. The more you free yourself from the energy of scarcity and desperation, the more you align with the frequency of natural abundance. The more you reconnect with your intrinsic worth, the less you need to prove your worth through external acquisitions. This paradox confuses many people because it contradicts the linear logic we were taught about achievement and effort. We're conditioned to believe that the more desperately we want something, the more likely we are to get it. But the truth is the opposite. Desperation repels what we desire, while tranquil confidence naturally attracts experiences that are aligned with our essence. True wealth isn't an external objective to be conquered, it's an internal state to be recognized. You are already abundant by nature. You are already prosperous in essence. You are already rich in your deepest origin. What you seek in the external world already exists in the internal world, waiting only to be recognized, honored, and expressed. The invitation this moment offers you is radical. Stop seeking abundance as if it was something separate from you. Begin to recognize that you are abundance itself, seeking to express through human form. You don't need to become abundant. You just need to stop pretending you're scarce. This shift in perspective is revolutionary because it completely transforms your life strategy. Instead of trying to conquer wealth through external effort, you begin to express wealth through internal alignment. Instead of seeking abundance in the world, you allow the abundance that already exists within you to manifest in the world. This is the great awakening that Nietzsche tried to provoke in his readers. The understanding that we are much vaster, more powerful, and freer than we were taught to believe. Your financial limitations aren't truths about you. They're just temporary stories you can choose to rewrite at any moment. The power of rewriting is always available because your identity isn't fixed. You're not a finished product of your past experiences. You're a continuous creative process, constantly choosing who you want to be in the next moment. Every breath is an opportunity to choose a new version of yourself, a version more aligned with your abundant nature. The power is in your hands. The choice is yours. The moment is now. You can continue repeating the patterns inherited from childhood, or you can consciously choose to become the most abundant and prosperous version of yourself. You can continue being a victim of foreign programming, or you can take total responsibility for creating your financial reality. Transformation happens the instant you decide your story of scarcity has come to an end. The moment you consciously choose to believe in your infinite capacity to create and receive, the second you recognize yourself as a legitimate expression of universal abundance, this decision isn't just mental, it's a choice of your entire being. It's your soul declaring its true nature. It's your heart opening to receive what was always yours by right. It's your body relaxing from the contractions of fear and expanding in the confidence of natural abundance. The universe is waiting for your decision. Your new life is waiting for your yes. Your abundance is waiting for your recognition. The time of pretending you are small has come to an end. The time to assume your greatness has begun now. If this message touched something deep within you, if you felt your limiting structures being questioned, if something inside you remembered your abundant nature, then share in the comments what was the most powerful insight you had. Tell us which childhood voice you recognized in yourself. Share with us what programming you're ready to transform. Your journey of healing and expansion inspires others to begin their own journey. Your courage to question limiting patterns gives others permission to do the same. Your personal transformation contributes to the collective transformation of consciousness about abundance and prosperity. If you felt this reflection added value to your life, if something within you expanded through these words, consider supporting this content. This support allows us to continue creating materials that challenge paradigms and inspire deep transformations. And if you want to continue receiving messages that awaken your higher consciousness, that question your limitations and remind you of your true abundant nature, follow our content and turn on notifications. Together, we're creating a new narrative about conscious prosperity, a new reality where abundance and spiritual evolution walk hand in hand. Your transformation has already begun. Your abundance is already on its way. Your prosperous future is already being created through the expanded consciousness you chose to cultivate in this moment. The rest is just time and consistency in applying these profound insights.